Today in this 2010 Nissan Altima, we'll be having a look at and showing you how to install the MagnaFlow Ceramic Catalytic Converter, part number MF49504. Now the reason you're shopping around for a replacement catalytic converter for your vehicle is you either have a couple different things going on. The converter itself could be clogged, you could be having a check engine light because it's not as efficient as it used to be anymore. You need to replace it so you can pass emissions. Or like in our case, the converter assembly, which has the flex pipe built into it, has developed a leak and we have excessive exhaust noise, which is why we're replacing our converter assembly today. And now that you've heard it before with the original catalytic converter in place with the broken flex pipe and the new replacement catalytic converter in, you'll notice how much quieter it is. Here's what our converter looks like installed. As you'll notice, it's a direct fit one-piece replacement for our catalytic converter assembly on our vehicle. It goes all the way from our factory exhaust manifold and primary catalytic converter, includes our flex pipe, comes back, has our secondary catalytic converter, and then the flange where it goes to our exhaust resonator on our factory exhaust system. Now, not only is this designed to be a direct replacement for a damaged or worn out factory exhaust component, but the high flow ceramic catalytic converter can even add a little bit of performance to your vehicle. Now, when we compare this to the factory converter, right here underneath our subframe, you can see how large of a diameter of the pipe that we have. And this is because it's mandrel bent. Here on the factory piece, where it's bent to go underneath the subframe, you can see how it's crushed down. And this is going to reduce airflow and can reduce performance. Another great thing about this converter assembly is that the converter itself is EPA approved and compliant in 49 states and Canada. So you don't have to worry about failing emissions or your safety inspections for having a missing converter or one that won't pass a smog test. You're good to go in every state in the United States except for California. Now, while a converter itself is ceramic material on the inside, all of our piping is stainless steel. And what this is going to allow us to have is exhaust piping that's going to last a very long time. It won't rust out anywhere near as fast as how the factory one did. To begin our install, we're going to find the catalytic converter on our vehicle. In this case, we're replacing the secondary catalytic converter and not the primary. So underneath the vehicle, basically right below where our front passenger and driver's seat are, this is our secondary catalytic converter. Now, in order to get the old converter out of the vehicle, we're going to remove this brace right here that's underneath it, just so we have a little bit more room. It's held in place with 4 13mm bolts. Notice there is an arrow on it that faces towards the front of the car, so just keep that in mind. Now, in our converter assembly, we do have an oxygen sensor. We need to unplug this before we lower it. So we'll start by first getting the wire out of this clip. Use a flathead screwdriver to pry it open as we get the wires out. A little Christmas tree fastener right here that holds the plug in place. We use a flathead screwdriver, we can pop it off of that. We'll pull it down. And then we can see a tab right here that we need to press on to unplug it. As we press down on it, I'll get it started with the screwdriver, then I use my finger, then I can pull the plug to separate it. Now, at the front of our converter assembly, we'll have 3 17mm bolts where it bolts to our factory exhaust manifold and primary converter assembly. We'll need to remove these. It's always a good idea to use a little bit of spray lubricant on the threads to help it come out. We've already had this soaking overnight before, so they should come out fairly easily for us. Now at the back side of our converter assembly, we have 2 nuts on studs that hold it to our exhaust resonator assembly. Now, these nuts are going to get very rusty underneath your vehicle because they are exposed to the most moisture and salt corrosion from the roads. Now, you can try using penetrating oil, but more than likely you're going to need the blue tipped wrench, also known as a torch, to heat these up in order to get them off. You can use a MAP gas torch like this, which is readily available at most hardware stores. So we're going to heat these up until they're red hot. And now that we got it hot enough, we can actually move it by hand. Now that we have one of our nuts off, we'll do the same for the other location. Okay, now right at our subframe, we have an exhaust hanger that has two 13mm bolts. We need to remove these. With those bolts removed, we can now swing it down from the front and then pull it off on the studs on the back and remove it from the vehicle. All right, now we need to take our oxygen sensor out of our old catalytic converter assembly and swap it over to our new one. Now, if you don't have an oxygen sensor socket, you can use a 22mm wrench and you can easily break it free. Then you can unscrew it by hand. We'll now transfer the oxygen sensor to the new assembly in the same location. And we'll snug it down nice and tight. Now, in some instances, your car may be equipped with another oxygen sensor that's past the catalytic converter, the secondary converter. In our case, our vehicle doesn't have that, so we need to plug it. We're using a bung for this, and you can get one of these at an auto parts store. So we'll just screw that in there, and we'll snug it down. Now we'll transfer our exhaust hanger from the old converter assembly to the new one. This will simply just pull off there, and we'll slide it on here. Now that we have everything off of our old converter that we need, here's a tip for you. The precious metals inside the converter themselves are actually worth quite a bit of money. So if you were to take this to a scrap yard, you can actually recoup the cost of purchasing a new one. Now we'll take off the old gasket from our muffler and replace it with the new one that comes with our converter. We'll now take our donut gasket and place it over the pipe on the flange where it goes to our engine. So we'll start by hanging it on the studs for our muffler. And now we'll bolt our hanger back to our subframe. And now we'll put nuts over the studs by our muffler. We opted to get new nuts from the dealership. Let's get these started. And now we'll get our flange mated to our factory exhaust manifold and converter assembly and reinstall the existing bolts, since they came out very easily. Now that we have all of our hardware started, we can tighten it down. Now I'll plug our oxygen sensor back into the factory wiring harness and clip it back to the vehicle. And now we'll reinstall our brace. Okay, now that we have everything back in place, we went ahead and started the engine up, and we're going to check for any exhaust leaks. So to do that, we'll just stick our hand around the flange and feel for any hot air escaping. So we'll do this at the rear flange and at the front flange. If we don't feel any hot air escaping, we know we don't have any leaks. And that completes our look at and showing you how to install the MagnaFlow Ceramic Catalytic Converter, part number MF49504 on this 2010 Nissan Altima.